motorcycle world didn't see this coming. While legacy brands clung to chrome and nostalgia, Suzuki launched a silent revolution. No fanfare, no hype, just a bike that changed everything. It wasn't just cheaper, it was smarter. And now the entire industry is scrambling to catch up, ghosting the market, on purpose. Most thought Suzuki disappeared because it failed, but it didn't. It stepped away because it saw the storm coming. And when it returned, it didn't need a comeback tour, it needed a trigger. While competitors doubled down on lifestyle branding, bloated production cycles, and increasingly fragile pricing models, Suzuki tightened its belt, shuttered low-performing lines, and listened. The retreat wasn't cowardice, it was chess. And when the timing aligned, Suzuki didn't need to catch up. It simply needed to reappear. Cruiser fans might remember when Suzuki's Boulevard series quietly faded from showrooms. There were no headlines, no grand farewells, just an increasingly thin presence and eventually a clean break. The vacuum left behind was quickly filled by companies that believed louder was better, that price hikes signaled quality, and that every new rider wanted to buy into a culture before a bike. That assumption created the exact space Suzuki needed. In truth, Suzuki never stopped paying attention. It watched the post-recession belt tightening. It watched as younger riders entered the market with less money, more debt, and no appetite for motorcycle tribalism. It watched as Harley's core customer aged out of their lifestyle. And it watched as Honda gained momentum not with flash, but with restraint. That watchful silence allowed Suzuki to study how far the market had drifted from its roots. Riders didn't abandon cruisers, they were priced out of them. And as competitors kept chasing shrinking margins, Suzuki was already mapping a way back. A way defined not by marketing, but by math. All of that led to one decisive figure. A number so unthinkable in today's market that it didn't just challenge expectations, it erased them entirely. We've done the deep dive for you. Now it's your turn to share. If you're loving this breakdown of Suzuki's bold move, make sure to like this video, comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you don't miss out on more game-changing insights in the motorcycle market. The price tag heard round the world, $9,000. Not after incentives, not with fine print. That was the actual starting point. And for that amount, buyers got a full-sized, ready-to-ride cruiser with fuel injection, modern suspension, and classic geometry. No corner cutting, no brand theatrics, just function over flash. For an industry that had spent the last decade drifting into the pricing territory of luxury cars, it was like someone slammed the brakes on a runaway train. Suzuki's pricing wasn't just a sales tactic, it was a philosophical assault on how motorcycles were being sold. The average new cruiser had become unaffordable for the very riders who once made the segment matter. Finance plans were stretched across 7 years. Accessory packages bloated sticker prices by thousands. Suddenly, what used to be the most blue-collar form of motorcycling was now a premium experience with premium expectations. By breaking the $10,000 floor without apology, Suzuki shattered the illusion that entry-level had to mean compromised. It proved that cost control didn't have to translate into cutting corners. Instead, it came from smart design, reused platforms, simplified manufacturing, and above all, knowing what riders actually want. This wasn't a budget bike pretending to be something more. It was a smart bike priced for the world we're living in now. And the timing couldn't have been better. With inflation hitting discretionary income, younger riders entering the market, and boomers retiring out of it, the sweet spot between accessibility and quality had never been more valuable. The result was a jolt to every competitor, but one felt it more than the rest. Not because it had failed, but because it had succeeded. And Suzuki knew exactly where to aim first. Need gear that matches this kind of clarity? We've linked trusted helmets, jackets, and gloves in the description. No fluff, just what works. Honda was the first target. Suzuki wasn't chasing Harley when it re-entered the cruiser space. It was targeting the quiet winner, Honda. The Rebel 500 and Rebel 1100 had already disrupted the market by trimming fat and focusing on usability. But Honda did so with subtle tech, dual-clutch transmission options, and a clean sheet design approach. Suzuki's move? Strip that formula down even further and remove the cost layers Honda still couldn't shake. Where Honda leaned into optional tech and expanded production capacity with measured risk, Suzuki leaned on old powertrains, proven platforms, and minimal electronics. They didn't build something new, they weaponized what already worked. This kept tooling costs low, part availability high, and the final sticker shockingly lean. It wasn't innovation, it was engineering minimalism turned into a sales strategy. The goal wasn't to reinvent the cruiser, it was to drag it back to earth. Suzuki saw what the Rebel had accomplished and asked, how do we do that without the extras? No ride modes, no DCT, no needless marketing polish, just steel, torque, and value. And that decision turned a move of survival into a show of force. By out-Hondaing Honda, Suzuki positioned itself not as a follower, but as a refinement engine. It didn't offer a different vision of the future. It offered the same one, only stripped of every luxury tax and aesthetic markup that had crept in over the last decade. And while Honda responded with elegance and restraint, Suzuki did something sharper. It undercut the trend by refusing to play it. And as buyers start noticing, the real shift begins. Not in brand loyalty, but in how riders define value in the first place. The riders nobody was talking to. For years, the motorcycle industry fixated on the wrong rider. It chased the collector, the outlaw, the veteran enthusiast who saw the bike as an extension of an identity. Chrome was king. Nostalgia was currency. And any model that didn't sell a lifestyle was considered a compromise. But Suzuki saw something the others missed. A completely different rider emerging quietly across cities, towns, and forgotten highways. These riders weren't looking for rebellion or ritual. They weren't hung up on heritage. They were practical, frugal, curious. Some were returning after years away. Others were first-timers tired of ride-share apps and traffic. What united them wasn't taste, it was need. They wanted a motorcycle that worked, a bike that felt right on a weekday commute and didn't break the bank to own or maintain. These riders weren't browsing Harley-Davidson showrooms, they were checking fuel economy, seat height, and service intervals. And the market, blinded by its own mythology, ignored them. Suzuki didn't. Instead, it built a machine for people who saw motorcycles not as a lifestyle subscription, but as a solution. Priced below $10,000, mechanically straightforward, and built with reliability over flair, Suzuki's new cruiser didn't pander to history. It offered an alternative to it. For the first time in over a decade, someone had built a cruiser that felt like it belonged to real people, not to brand loyalists or image chasers. And that shift in focus, from reverence to relevance, set the stage for a confrontation the industry wasn't ready for. Because one brand had been built entirely on image, and Suzuki had just called its bluff. The Anti-Harley Weapon. Harley-Davidson isn't just a motorcycle brand, it's a cultural artifact. For decades, it defined what a cruiser was supposed to look like, sound like, and mean. But that same image has become its greatest vulnerability. Because what used to signal power, freedom, and rebellion now signals something else entirely. Cost, exclusivity, and resistance to change. And that's exactly where Suzuki drove its wedge. Suzuki didn't try to beat Harley at its own game. It changed the game entirely. While Harley doubled down on legacy and prestige, Suzuki bypassed both by offering something Harley could no longer afford to: honest value. Where Harley charged for a nameplate, Suzuki delivered torque and steel. Where Harley surrounded its buyers with merch, memberships, and mystique, Suzuki offered a seat, a throttle, and a price that made sense. The result wasn't a direct attack. It was an escape route. Riders, disillusioned by Harley's endless line of premium models, suddenly had another option. One that didn't require them to abandon their love for cruisers, just their patience with bloated pricing. And for younger riders, the ones who grew up with student loans instead of hot rods, Suzuki didn't need to replace Harley. It only needed to exist. This wasn't rebellion. It was realism. Suzuki didn't show up with new slogans or stylized leather jackets. It showed up with a cruiser you could actually buy. It took the mythology of the V-twin era and quietly walked it out the side door. But while Harley tried to stay loud, another competitor drifted in a different direction. Quieter, more polished, but no less disconnected. And Suzuki saw that opening too. Indian's identity creep. When Indian motorcycles relaunched under Polaris, it promised to be everything Harley wasn't. Lighter, faster, fresher, and just as iconic. And for a while it was. The Scout 60, and the Chief series offered an aggressive take on American muscle with just enough heritage to resonate. But slowly, Indian's message began to blur. As prices crept upward and the lineup swelled with trims, finishes, and premium bundles, Indian started to look less like a disruptor and more like a boutique. What had once been positioned as a lean, rider-first brand began drifting toward exclusivity. Entry-level models became less accessible. Marketing turned glossier. The distance between the brand and the everyday rider widened, and Suzuki, watching closely, moved in where Indian had once claimed space. Indian didn't collapse. It drifted. And that drift created a vacuum for riders who wanted performance without the pretense. Suzuki offered just that. Stripped-down, affordable cruisers that didn't pretend to be relics or art pieces. While Indian asked riders to buy into a premium experience, Suzuki asked them one question: do you want to ride or not? It wasn't just a matter of price, it was a matter of focus. Indian tried to walk the line between legacy and luxury, but in doing so, it left behind the very buyers who had once made its comeback so compelling. And now those riders are no longer waiting for Indian to correct course. They've already walked through Suzuki's open door. That shift isn't just happening in brand perception, it's being felt most acutely where the motorcycles are actually moving or not moving at all. The dealer's quiet betrayal. If identity is fractured and branding is in flux, the true battlefield is the dealership floor. And the reality there is simple. Bikes either move or they don't. In showrooms across the United States, dealers who once swore by Harley or Indian are facing inventory that won't budge, floor plans that don't pencil out, and customers who've stopped pretending brand loyalty outweighs monthly payments. Suzuki's cruisers aren't showroom showpieces, they're sales momentum in physical form. Priced under $10,000, easy to finance, and trusted to start every time, they've become a favorite among dealerships looking for one thing: turnover. In states like Texas, Ohio, and Missouri, Suzuki inventory is cycling faster than many premium brands can restock. And it's not just first-time riders. Middle-aged buyers, returning bikers, and even brand switchers are coming through the doors asking for the bike that doesn't come with drama. Dealers, once proudly married to legacy brands, are making quiet moves. Some are applying for Suzuki certifications. Others are blending their showrooms under different LLCs to avoid scrutiny from loyalist buyers. A few have even started shifting floor space away from models that just sit in favor of those that move. And in almost every case, Suzuki is at the center of that pivot. This isn't about betrayal, it's about business. Dealers are chasing reliability in the bikes they sell, the parts they stock, and the customers who walk back through the door happy. Suzuki didn't demand loyalty, it earned trust. And in today's fractured market, that trust may be the most powerful currency of all. As floor traffic shifts and sales data tells a new story, the industry is realizing this isn't just a product trend, it's a redistribution of power. One motorcycle at a time, built to win, quietly. Suzuki's playbook didn't need rewriting, it just needed reactivation. While other brands invested heavily in new platforms, modular frameworks, and highly branded rider experiences, Suzuki leaned on something more durable: discipline. It had no interest in reinventing itself every 5 years. Instead, it chose refinement. Legacy power plants, decades of tooling, and deeply integrated supplier relationships allowed Suzuki to build motorcycles with the kind of efficiency other companies lost chasing reinvention. That quiet consistency is what gave Suzuki the edge. While Indian updated its identity and Harley tried to stretch its past into a future it no longer fit, Suzuki kept its operation compact and predictable. Its global manufacturing web, which includes facilities in Thailand, Japan, India, and South America, was never about scale for its own sake. It was about redundancy, efficiency, stability. This allowed Suzuki to retain older chassis designs, update them subtly, and continue delivering machines that didn't need emotional storytelling to justify their price tag. That is what most people missed. When the new Suzuki Cruisers arrived under the $10,000 ceiling, they weren't built cheaply. They were built from a blueprint that never depended on flash. Using long-proven engine platforms, familiar frame geometries, and standardized parts, Suzuki achieved something radical in today's economy: affordability without apology. It was not stripped down, it was stripped right. And that understated strength became even more obvious during the one event that exposed nearly every other brand's weaknesses. It wasn't a market crash or a corporate scandal. It was something much bigger and far more revealing. COVID cracked the industry open. When COVID-19 hit, it didn't merely challenge motorcycle companies, it revealed the hollow parts of their business models. Most major manufacturers were caught unprepared. Parts shortages, delayed shipments, and rising freight costs crippled production lines around the world. Dealerships were left with empty floors and angry customers. Harley-Davidson had to pause entire assembly lines. Yamaha struggled to meet orders across North America. Even Honda, with its vast supply chain, found itself constrained by global disruptions. Suzuki, however, weathered the storm with surprising calm. It wasn't immune to delays or supply pressures, but it had spent years refining a manufacturing strategy that didn't rely on single-source vendors or fragile just-in-time systems. Where others scrambled to find chips, plastic components, or shipping containers, Suzuki adjusted sourcing across its global footprint. When one region stalled, another picked up. And because its designs used standardized and widely available components, there was far less panic in its procurement teams. This flexibility wasn't a matter of luck. It was the product of a strategy rooted in preparation over innovation. Suzuki had fewer moving parts, both literally and organizationally. Its smaller lineup, conservative design philosophy, and commitment to production discipline allowed it to move quickly when others were bogged down by scale. COVID-19 was not just a pandemic, it was a stress test. It showed which brands were operating on faith and which were built on function. And Suzuki's performance during this period wasn't just admirable, it was instructive. It proved that simplicity, far from being a liability, was the only thing capable of surviving a global shock intact. What looked like an afterthought became the backbone of a comeback. But that only worked because the market itself had changed. And in that change, every factor tilted in Suzuki's favor. Why does it work now? Timing isn't luck, it is readiness. Meeting reality. Suzuki didn't just roll out a new cruiser in a vacuum. It delivered the right machine at the exact moment the market needed something honest. Riders are no longer romanticizing motorcycle ownership. They are recalculating it. They are thinking about maintenance costs, financing plans, and insurance premiums. They are factoring in inflation, rent hikes, and medical bills, and they are finding that most of the industry's offerings simply do not match the moment. Suzuki's success wasn't driven by cutting-edge innovation. It was driven by understanding exactly who was left out of the conversation. The buyers who want a motorcycle, not a lifestyle. The riders who care more about range and torque than infotainment dashboards. The ones who just want something dependable, well-built, and affordable enough to own without debt. In an economy filled with shrinking paychecks and rising prices, those riders are no longer a niche. They are the majority. Dealers feel it too. They are tired of pushing overpriced units that sit unsold for months. They want stock that moves, machines that riders can actually buy. Suzuki gave them that. And because the company didn't bet everything on one flashy launch, but instead leveraged a long-term structure built for reliability, it could meet that demand almost immediately. This was not a fluke. This was execution. Suzuki had the right bike, the right infrastructure, and the right restraint. While others reached for attention, Suzuki built for utility, and when the dust settled, utility won. And as we head deeper into this industry shift, the most telling sign isn't in sales charts or marketing copy. It's in what Suzuki's competitors are now being forced to confront. A reality they didn't plan for, but can no longer ignore. The brands that can't compete. Suzuki didn't just introduce a cheaper motorcycle, it exposed who could no longer afford to build one. The problem isn't that Harley-Davidson, Indian, or Triumph are unwilling to match Suzuki's pricing, it's that they are structurally incapable of doing so. These brands aren't just attached to legacy, they're trapped inside it. Their factories, their supply chains, and their dealership networks were built in a different time, for a different kind of customer, with different expectations, and the cost of that infrastructure is now choking their ability to adapt. The average Harley-Davidson cruiser carries within its price tag a burden of tradition. Premium materials, multiple paint stages, region-specific production, union labor contracts, and a dealer experience designed around aspirational luxury. That model doesn't scale down easily. Indian, despite being under Polaris, faces a similar challenge. The very ecosystem that allows it to command high margins is the same one that prevents it from building a bike at Suzuki's price point without gutting its identity. Even Triumph, known for lean European engineering, is weighed down by currency fluctuations, high-cost suppliers, and a heritage-focused lineup that doesn't resonate with entry-level buyers. In contrast, Suzuki's global production model relies on long amortized tooling, shared component platforms, and centralized design logic that prioritizes cost efficiency over regional flair. It's not glamorous, but it works. And now, as inflation rises and consumer debt tightens, Suzuki's model isn't just efficient, it's prophetic. Because when price becomes a survival metric, the brands built on exclusivity are the first ones to lose relevance. And while they continue clinging to their traditional market segments, a much larger crisis is already beginning to unfold, and it is not economic. It is political. The political backlash begins. When Suzuki landed its sub-$10,000 cruiser on American shores, it didn't just rattle competitors, it triggered a policy-level conversation that most lawmakers weren't prepared to have. In an election cycle where "Made in America" is more than a slogan, it is an ideological weapon. Every affordable import becomes a pressure point, especially when it exposes the limits of domestic manufacturing pride. Tariffs, once positioned as tools to protect American industry, are now backfiring. Under the prior administration, tariffs as high as 25% were imposed on imported motorcycle parts and raw materials. The assumption was that these would level the playing field. Instead, companies like Suzuki had already diversified production through Thailand, Vietnam, and India, dodging single-region exposure and minimizing tariff risk. Harley-Davidson and Indian, by contrast, were too entrenched. Their domestic production footprint became a liability rather than a strength. The optics are difficult to ignore. In regions like the Midwest, where American-made motorcycles were once a badge of honor, buyers are now lining up for foreign bikes simply because they cost thousands less. That reality has sparked heated debates, not just in dealerships but on Capitol Hill. Policy analysts are asking whether economic nationalism can survive globalization's realities. Voters are wondering why a bike built in Wisconsin is 20% more expensive than one assembled overseas with equal reliability. What Suzuki did, perhaps unintentionally, was illuminate the cost of nostalgia in a global supply chain. And once that light was turned on, the conversation didn't stay at the policy level. It moved to the factory floor. Because behind every affordable motorcycle is a labor story that can no longer be ignored. Labor in the crosshairs. Factory workers in the American motorcycle industry are not just under pressure, they're being structurally outflanked. For decades, unions have fought for better wages, benefits, and job security. And those efforts succeeded, for a time. But in the era of global production agility, high domestic labor costs are no longer protected by brand loyalty alone. Suzuki's cruiser doesn't just come with a lower price tag, it comes with a blueprint for labor minimization that's been refined for decades. Robotic assembly lines, cross-trained labor, regional redundancy. These aren't perks, they are survival tools. In contrast, Harley's factories are burdened by outdated workflows and job categories that can't easily pivot. Indian's production model is leaner, but it still relies heavily on North American infrastructure that's difficult to reroute without political or reputational fallout. Workers are seeing the writing on the wall, and it's not written in slogans, it's written in invoices. As dealerships prioritize Suzuki stock because it moves faster, union-backed manufacturing plants are left defending output that no longer justifies its own cost structure. That disconnect is creating tension not just between companies and employees, but within labor movements themselves. Some union leaders are calling for domestic investment incentives, others for revised trade protections. But neither of those moves will change what riders are actually doing: voting with their wallets. And those votes are eroding the foundational assumption that buying American is always worth the premium. The painful truth is that jobs aren't just being outsourced, they're being outmaneuvered. And as younger riders flock to lower-cost bikes that deliver everything they need and nothing they don't, the emotional fuel that once powered American manufacturing is running dry. What remains is a market governed not by mythology, but by utility. If you're enjoying this deep dive into Suzuki's game-changing strategy, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. The end of legacy, the rise of utility. The motorcycle market is no longer defined by charisma, it's defined by clarity. Suzuki's sub-$10,000 cruiser doesn't just signal a pricing shift, it confirms a generational transition. Riders under the age of 35 aren't looking for symbols, they're looking for solutions. They don't care about engine nostalgia or chrome polish. They care about fuel range, maintenance intervals, and monthly payments that make sense. That shift isn't temporary, it's foundational. Legacy brands were built on lifestyle. They sold freedom, rebellion, community. But younger consumers are already flooded with identities online. They don't need to buy one on two wheels. Instead, they're asking different questions. Can this fit in a city garage? Will it last 10 years? Can I ride it without joining a club or memorizing a brand's mythology? Suzuki's answer was brutally simple. Yes, yes, and absolutely. This is not a rebranding moment, it's a regime change. The cruiser segment, once the loudest, flashiest part of motorcycling, is being recentered around practicality. That doesn't mean performance is dead. It means performance must be priced properly. That doesn't mean style is gone. It means style can't be used to mask over-engineering and inflated markups. As Suzuki pulls riders away from legacy brands, it is doing something more disruptive than cutting prices. It is changing the default setting. Buyers are no longer asking, "Is this as cool as a Harley?" They are asking, "Is this as reliable, as affordable, and as real as a Suzuki?" Suzuki didn't just bring a new cruiser to market. They brought a shift in the entire industry. If you've enjoyed this analysis, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more in-depth reviews and breakdowns. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you in the next video where we continue uncovering the future of motorcycling.